Typically, when a new huge game, especially one tied to a huge IP, gets previewed, there's one outlier, right? There's one article that's incredibly negative, maybe for shock value, maybe for clickbait, maybe because the game just didn't gel with that person. But as excited as I am for Star Wars Outlaws, I noticed a common thread that even the positive previews had that originated in the negative preview. Today, I want to talk about some of the issues with Star Wars Outlaws and whether or not we think that the final product can actually overcome these, whether or not we have faith in Ubisoft, and whether or not these issues are actually a problem for you. So make sure to let me know in the comments down below how you're feeling and thinking about Star Wars Outlaws after the previews and the new footage. What's going on, everybody? It's GhostRobo, and I'm going to start off with Eurogamer, which is that negative preview I was talking about. They say, gosh, this is such shade. They say that the closest comparison I can draw for Star Wars Outlaws is Uncharted Golden Abyss, the 2011 PlayStation Vita Uncharted offshoot. Ooh. Now, at the time, I thought playing Uncharted on a handheld was freaking sick. I loved my Vita. I was all about it. But that is not a flattering comparison. That is saying that Star Wars Outlaws feels like a facsimile, a copy, a clone of something that is far better. And the article says that it was a very worrying hands-on, much less exciting than they expected, and I'll focus on the main points that they took issue with. Number one, they took issue with the world being pretty and detailed but dead. Not much interactability at all. Number two, they took issue with the animations and the fact that the game felt like it was not up to the same level of polish and par that the Jedi Survivor series has set for Star Wars in the modern video gaming industry. Number three, the stealth seemed very basic, the gunplay seemed basic, and the enemies were not really reacting to downed bodies or typical things that you'd expect from a stealth game. And Star Wars Outlaws really tries to emphasize its stealth. And they said there's basically no detection. And then number four, we have this issue that it's easy or mechanically light. Now, this one is the most surprising to me because we know that the team behind this is massive, and that's the name. Like, they're probably also massive because it's Ubisoft, but it's massive. The people that did The Division. We know Ubisoft is very comfortable making open world games, and we know that this should not be anything new for them. So the fact that they're saying it's mechanically light when the game has tried to show off its diversity, its immense variety, its seamless nature between, the stars and the ground and the bike and the combat, it's just very odd. Now, this might just sound like somebody who hated the game, who didn't enjoy their time, because basically every other preview I saw was pretty exciting, pretty happy, pretty positive, good gameplay, wonderful world is the Kotaku headline. And others said this is like the Star Wars 70s game they wanted. I saw some videos where they praised the animation, saying that they didn't feel they were stilted. They felt like it was going for this very over-the-top, like Indiana Jones style, like every punch is going to, blast the person's face off to the moon style. And they liked the way the game looked. They loved it, in fact, and they liked the way the game ran. But I did notice multiple negatives from the Eurogamer preview present in positive previews from other sites and sources, which is why I'm worried. If it was one source that just had a terrible time with the game, whatever. But all of the previews say the same thing, which is that this game is going to be awesome once we get to access the open world. They expect Ubisoft to, hit a home run with what their bread and butter is, because the demos that people got to play and see were very linear. It was like a few missions in a row, removing the traversal, like the in-between traversal. You got to still platform, but they removed like the sequencing, right? It was just a very linear level, which is very bizarre considering that this is supposed to be the first open world Star Wars game. But the comparisons between the negative previews and the positive previews don't stop there. because others noted the guards not reacting as well, saying that there was very low detection. Nyx would be sent out and knock down a body or distract a guard, and then Kay would come and take them out. And the other guards seemed to pay no mind to the body laying at their feet. Now, this is worrisome to me because this does speak to either a game that is spread very thin, right? It's trying to do too much, and therefore the mechanics that it does have are thin. We've got stealth, yes, but they noted that it's not the same stealth as like in the Division. You don't have as much flexibility and options when you're moving from cover to cover, and the enemies seem to be very unaware. So it's either that, this game that's wide but thin, or it's just not a very polished product, and it's focusing more on the open world. But then you have to ask yourself, why didn't they show off the open world? And many of these positive previews did enjoy the missions they played. They did enjoy the stealth section. They did enjoy the gunplay section. And they even said the fact that the enemies aren't detecting you is fine because the gunplay is fun. Now, the negative preview from Eurogamer did note that they thought the climbing and clambering felt very one note, very Uncharted, very much follow the giant yellow indicator that tells you this is where you need to go. They felt that the gunplay was pretty basic and pretty boring, and that you were picking up enemy weapons, and then they'd run out of ammo, and then you'd be down to your weapon, and you had two different types of fire. And we know you'll be able to acquire and upgrade your blaster in more ways, but it's interesting that this mechanical lightness was something that they emphasized as one of the biggest detractors. It's one thing if the animations aren't exactly like you'd love them to be. It's one thing if the enemies in some of these strongholds aren't as reactive. It's even one thing if the world is super detailed but not interactive, because as much as I would love that, it feels unrealistic to say this is this huge sprawling open world game, but yes, you can go up and interact with every stand and tap every droid and pet every creature. But having a mechanically light game means a boring game. And in an open world game, you're repeating tasks. If those tasks are not that great, oh boy, this runs out of steam really quickly. And if they did try to bite off more than they could chew and make this, a little bit of stealth, a little bit of space dogfighting, a little bit of combat, a little bit of exploration, maybe they don't have the chops that, say, the team at the Respawn does over at EA with Jedi Survivor, who I feel were able to generate a wide variety of gameplay into a tight package. And maybe they are going to bring something that feels kind of dull. Like I said, everything thus far is very positive except for that one, but does state that they can't wait for the open world to really see it all come together. And it does feel like it is going to be very heavily reliant on how the open world ties things together, as the individual actions are good, just like that headline from Kotaku, good gameplay, but wonderful world. Yet they haven't really seen much of the world besides the great, as noted by those who played it, visual presentation, the great audio presentation, and the great authentic Star Wars feel. So it gets points for that no matter what, but can the Star Wars feel carry the game? Because we have come to know games like Jedi Survivor and Jedi Fallen Order that are able to give it a Star Wars feel and deliver excellent gameplay. Ubisoft maybe doesn't always have excellent gameplay, but I feel like they're usually pretty tight on that front. To me, at least, where they lose it is on kind of the repetitiveness and the open world, and so I hope, because this was going for such variety and had such a seamless nature, that they would be able to overcome that. And I do think The Division is like a solid game. It's not my cup of tea because I don't really love games as services, but from what I've played of The Division, I also just don't really like to do multiplayer co-op stuff. Don't really have a ton of friends, don't really want to set a time and be scheduled and all that. But anyways, I did enjoy my single-player time with The Division. It's just that The Division controls incredibly well, so it's weird to say that even in the positive previews, they're talking about how Kay felt unwieldy at the platforming sections. Now, The Division didn't platform very much. They note that the gunplay feels solid, so that makes sense. But is this a case of Massive trying to do more than the team is comfortable for? This game is next-gen only, or current-gen only, however you want to phrase it, which is excellent. Comes out on PS5, Xbox Series X and S, and PC. So it should be a very pretty-looking game. It should be a very tantalizing game from a visual perspective. and from a Star Wars perspective. But look at here. If Uncharted's weakness is its linear climbing, it has insane level of detail, epic world building, and a phenomenal story, right? If, a game like Far Cry has weak repetitiveness, the gunplay is very good, and the open world is usually very interesting and multi-dynamic in terms of the biomes and environments that you explore. We know that Outlaws has sort of, I'll call them like cones, right? Like you enter this cone, you light speed travel, and then enter this cone, and then there's some space, there's a planet. It's going to feel, I think, more stilted than the traditional open world maps we've come to expect from Ubisoft because of the fact that it's these different planets. And it does seem like there's like 4 or 5 planets. Maybe there's a secret planet. Maybe there's some planets that have individual missions. I would hope for that. That there's some that aren't open world, but are just like, hey, you get to go to a different environment for a singular mission. The one thing that this has going for it that was not featured in this demo at all, and that doesn't seem to be too replicated in other Ubisoft games, is the whole reputation system. The whole reputation of living the life of a scoundrel who's trying to create this nasty balancing act of appeasing the Hutts, but also making sure not to piss off the Pikes, and appeasing the Crimson Dawn, but making sure that they don't cause a intergalactic trade war. If they can hit that, I think it's okay if some of the other elements are not 8 or 9 out of 10. If they don't hit that, then we're in trouble. I saw Eurogamer say that they felt the story and the characters were very dull and boring, whereas others said, oh my gosh, Nyx is the second coming of BD, and they felt like the story and the characters were well crafted. So some of that is going to come down to personal preference. Maybe it also matters how big of a Star Wars fan you are. Big Star Wars fan probably can excuse some of the gameplay issues. Less of a Star Wars fan, some of that stuff probably stands out to you. But I do believe this is Ubisoft's big shining moment to prove that they can do more than just be an open world map icon warehouse. That they're not just a factory for the familiar, but that they're able to craft something unique. And I still place a lot of faith in Star Wars Outlaws because they have not shown off the part of the game that does make this distinct, which is that open world. They're strangely omitting that from the hands-on previews and focusing instead on these mechanics, and maybe it bites them in the butt, or maybe the world isn't that exciting, or maybe they're just trying to hold back because they do have another presentation closer to launch. I don't know. I still am going to give the benefit of the doubt to Massive. I think they're a strong developer. The benefit of the doubt to Ubisoft that they understand their history, but also know places and areas they need to improve. But it will be a big bummer if this is a Star Wars game that has a great concept of being a smuggler, but ends up being mediocre in many ways because it tried to be a jack of all trades and ends up being a K of none. Let me know your take in the comments down below. How do you feel about this? And do you feel a little bit worried that some of the positive previews are echoing the same things as the negatives, but brushing them off as like, oh, you know what? It felt a little stilted and unwieldy. I'm sure that'll get better. Oh, the world's pretty dull, but I'm sure it'll be better when it's an open world. Nobody recognizes what's going on, but hey, we're excited to explore the open world, even if the detection system is paltry at best. How do you think this is going to shake out? Let me know what you're thinking. Till next time, everybody, drink some hot chocolate, and we will see you all later.